My name's Daniel, and at the time of this story, I was 29. It was Thanksgiving, the first one without Grandpa. He passed away 3 months earlier, and honestly, nothing felt the same without him. For as long as I could remember, Grandpa was the real head of the family. Not officially, of course, but he was the one everyone listened to. Every holiday, every argument, every messy family drama, it was always Grandpa who smoothed things over. Without him, it felt like the center of gravity was gone, and everyone was quietly circling each other, waiting for something to snap. The gathering was at my mom's house this year, same as always. Same peeling wallpaper, same wobbly dining room table that Grandpa had built back when Mom was a kid. The same turkey Mom always overcooked, the same passive-aggressive chatter floating across the table. It should have felt comforting in a twisted way. Familiar. But it didn't. Not this year. There was this thick, unspoken tension in the air, like everybody was pretending nothing had changed while secretly waiting for something, anything, to blow up. I sat near the end of the table, poking at my food, pretending not to notice the sideways glances coming my way. It had been happening more and more lately, ever since the reading of Grandpa's will. None of them said it out loud, but I could feel it. Resentment, jealousy, disbelief. They didn't understand why Grandpa had left almost everything to me. Not just sentimental things, not just his old pocket watch or a few trinkets. No, the house, the land, the savings, all of it. To me. I wasn't even the oldest grandchild. That was my sister, Emily. She was 31, prettier, louder, and infinitely better at schmoozing than I ever was. She had the kind of smile that could melt ice, the kind of charm that made people hand over their wallets without realizing it. And she hated me for beating her at something she couldn't control. I knew the whispers had been building since the funeral. Emily was the ringleader, no doubt. She was always good at rallying people to her side when she wanted to. Poor Emily, who spent so much time with Grandpa. Poor Emily, who was obviously the favorite. Poor Emily, who deserved better. I tried to tune it out, tried to rise above it. Grandpa had made his choice. I wasn't about to apologize for it. Still, sitting there, surrounded by fake smiles and brittle laughter, I felt the weight of it. It clung to me like a second skin. Every toast, every laugh, every clink of a fork against a plate, it all felt just a little too forced. That's when it happened. Emily, sitting directly across from me in her overpriced dress and 2 high heels, leaned back in her chair, twirling a glass between her fingers like she was hosting her own little talk show. She smirked, that infuriating, syrupy sweet smirk she always wore when she was about to stir the pot, and said, in a voice dripping with fake innocence, "Let's be thankful we're not pathetic like some people at this table." For a half second, the table went dead silent. Then, as if on cue, a few awkward chuckles floated up. My cousin Evan snorted into his napkin. Aunt Marcy hid a smile behind her glass. Even Mom gave this nervous little titter like she didn't know whether to laugh or scold her. I set down my fork, slow and deliberate. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but my face didn't show it. Years of practice. Years of swallowing my pride, of being the good son, the quiet one, the easygoing nephew. But something inside me clicked off like a light switch. I smiled, not the strained, polite kind I usually wore around them. A real smile. Calm. Measured. Deadly. Funny, I said, my voice steady enough to cut glass. Grandpa didn't think I was pathetic when he left me everything. The words hit the table like a bomb. You could feel it, the collective intake of breath, the shift in the atmosphere. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Glasses clinked against plates. Emily's face went slack, her smirk wiped clean off as if someone had physically smacked it away. I wasn't done. I picked up my glass, took a slow sip of water, and said, almost casually, "Good luck finding somewhere else to live." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the worn-out carpet. See, what they hadn't figured out yet, or maybe they just hadn't wanted to believe, was that Grandpa's will didn't just leave me the house and land in theory. It was all legally binding. Transfer complete. Deeds signed. Paperwork filed. Everything that Mom and Emily and the rest of them had always taken for granted, the roof over their heads, the land they treated like their birthright, was now mine. I saw the realization dawn in Emily's eyes first, then ripple out across the table like a slow, spreading panic. Mom's fork slipped from her hand, clattering onto her plate. Uncle Mark actually went a little pale, like he might faint right into his stuffing. Evan muttered something under his breath and shoved his chair back, suddenly very interested in leaving the table. Emily opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For once in her life, she was completely at a loss for words. It was glorious. I just sat there, letting the weight of it settle in, letting them stew in it. Every fake laugh, every snide comment, every little jab they'd ever thrown my way, all of it led to this moment. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel outnumbered. I felt powerful, but I wasn't here just to gloat. No, this was just the beginning. Because what none of them realized, not yet, was that I had plans. Big ones. Grandpa's house needed major repairs, ones they had ignored for years because it wasn't technically their responsibility. The taxes on the land were overdue. Utilities were in my name now. And when I was done, none of them would be able to pretend it was still theirs. I set down my glass, picked up my napkin, and calmly wiped my mouth. Then, as if nothing had happened, I turned to Aunt Marcy and asked, "Could you pass the potatoes?" She handed them over with a trembling hand. Emily finally found her voice, though it was a lot smaller than before. You can't be serious." I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. Dead serious. Her face flushed bright red, and for a moment, I thought she might actually throw her glass at me. Part of me almost hoped she would. Let her. Let her throw the first real punch so I could finish what she started. But she didn't. She just sat there, seething, practically vibrating with rage and humiliation. And I just kept eating, slow and steady, like this was the most normal Thanksgiving dinner in the world. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Personally, I think it's better served with turkey, stuffing, and a side of stunned silence. And I was just getting started. The rest of Thanksgiving dinner dragged on like some kind of surreal fever dream. Nobody said much after that. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks scraped plates with a kind of desperate focus, like if they just pretended hard enough, they could rewind the last 5 minutes. But reality sat heavy over the table, thicker than the smell of burnt gravy. I could feel the stares, even when I wasn't looking. Aunt Marcy's watery eyes darting toward me and away again. Uncle Mark pretending to check his phone over and over. Evan, who kept glancing at Emily like he expected her to do something. Mom looked the worst, like she was trapped between outrage and terror, her mouth twitching like she was holding back 1,000 words she didn't dare say. And Emily. Emily didn't even try to fake it anymore. She sat rigid in her chair, gripping her glass so tightly I half expected it to shatter. Her eyes bore into me with a hatred so raw it was almost impressive. If glares could kill, I'd have been buried next to Grandpa by dessert. I ate slowly, methodically. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes. I made a point of savoring every bite, letting them stew in their silence. I wasn't in a rush. No, this moment had been earned. When dessert finally stumbled its way to the table, a sad-looking pumpkin pie with a cracked center, Mom cleared her throat and said, "Daniel, maybe we could talk later." Privately. Her voice was brittle, almost pleading. I set down my fork and dabbed my mouth with my napkin again. Slow. Deliberate. "Of course, Mom," I said pleasantly. Happy to. But I wasn't planning to let her steer the conversation. Not anymore. As people started clearing their plates, making excuses to get some fresh air or help in the kitchen, Emily cornered me by the entryway. Her heels clicked sharply on the worn hardwood, and her hands were balled into fists at her sides. "You can't do this," she hissed under her breath. This was supposed to stay in the family. I raised an eyebrow. "It is staying in the family. I'm family. Or have you forgotten?" Her lips curled like she wanted to spit something truly vile at me, but she held it back. Barely. I could see her calculating, trying to find an angle, a weak spot. "You don't even need it," she said, voice trembling. "You don't have kids. You don't have a family to raise here. What do you even want with all this?" I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Maybe I'm just tired of being treated like garbage by people who only show up when they think they can get something." Her nostrils flared. For a second, I thought she might actually hit me. She didn't. But the way she spun on her heel and stormed off was almost as satisfying. After most of the dishes were cleared and the stragglers had drifted toward the living room to watch a miserable football game, Mom found me by the back door. She looked older than I remembered, more tired, more fragile somehow. For a split second, guilt flickered in my chest. But it was quickly smothered by the years of memories, the dismissive comments, the constant favoritism, the way she let Emily get away with murder while I was expected to suck it up and be the good son. "Daniel," she said, wringing her hands, "I know you're upset. But you have to understand, this house is important. It's always been a place for all of us." I leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. "Funny. Never felt like that when I was growing up." She winced. "Look, I know we weren't perfect. But your sister, she's going through a tough time. She was counting on some of this. There it was. The real reason. She was counting on Grandpa dying and handing her a free house, I said flatly. Don't sugarcoat it. Mom's mouth snapped shut. She looked away, staring out the dusty window like it held all the answers she needed. I don't know what we're supposed to do, she whispered. For a moment, I said nothing. Let her sit with it. Let her feel even a fraction of the helplessness I'd felt growing up, the way they always made me the outsider in my own family. Finally, I pushed off the wall and said, "You'll figure it out. You always do." Her eyes filled with tears, real ones, not the crocodile tears Emily had mastered, and for a second, she looked like she might beg. Actually beg, but she didn't. Pride is a funny thing. I slipped on my coat and grabbed my keys. As I headed toward the door, I caught a glimpse of Emily sulking by the fireplace, surrounded by a few sympathetic cousins. She shot me a look that could have curdled milk. I smiled at her. A real, genuine smile. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. And then I walked out into the cold November night, the door swinging shut behind me with a satisfying click. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because while they spent the night stewing in their anger and confusion, I was already moving to the next step. Grandpa hadn't just left me the house. He left me the land, acres of it, and a detailed letter about what he wanted done with it. He had known, long before he passed, what this family was really like underneath all the polite small talk and forced family photos. And he had trusted me to carry it out. They thought losing the house was bad? They hadn't seen anything yet. That night, as I drove the long way back to my apartment, I thought about Grandpa, about the long talks we used to have on the porch, just the two of us while everyone else was inside arguing about something stupid, who got the biggest slice of pie, who deserved more help from him that month, who was working so hard and getting so little appreciation. I was the one who sat and listened, even when I didn't always have much to say. Maybe that's why he trusted me in the end. The letter he left me wasn't long, but every word was careful. Grandpa wasn't the type to waste breath or ink. He had written that he loved his family, but he wasn't blind. He saw how they treated each other and how they treated me. The house, the land, the savings, he left them to me because he wanted them to be used with purpose, not drained dry by people who thought they were owed the world for showing up once a month and smiling for a photo. I pulled into my parking spot, sat there for a while with the engine ticking as it cooled, and finally pulled out my phone. I already had the number saved. The real estate lawyer Grandpa had worked with for years. Mr. Hadley. The man was sharp, efficient, and not easily swayed by crocodile tears or empty threats. I thumbed out a simple text, ready to proceed. "Let's meet Monday." By the time I went to bed, my mind was racing, but there was a steady, quiet satisfaction underneath it. For once, I wasn't the one waiting for permission. I wasn't the one hoping to be noticed or included. I was holding the cards now, and I wasn't about to fold. The next few days were a study in chaos. It started with the messages. At first, they were cautious. Mom sent a few polite texts asking if I'd had time to think about things. Emily tried to act casual, asking if I wanted to grab coffee and chat. The guilt train was leaving the station right on schedule, fully loaded and gaining speed. I ignored them. Then came the escalation. Emily called me 3 times in one afternoon, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate. She started with sugary sweet, "Hey, Danny, just want to talk, okay? Love you," and ended the third message practically snarling, "You're making a huge mistake. Huge. Don't come crying to us when you realize what you've done." That last part made me laugh out loud. Me crying to them. That was rich. By Sunday night, Mom caved and just showed up at my apartment. She stood in the hallway in her old winter coat, holding a pie in a plastic grocery store container like some kind of peace offering. I didn't even bother inviting her in. I just stood there in the doorway, blocking her path. "Daniel," she said, with a forced smile. "Honey, can we just talk? As a family." "Sure," I said lightly. "Whose family? You or Emily's little fan club?" Her face fell, and for the first time, I saw something real flicker there. Not anger, not manipulation, just regret. "We made mistakes," she said softly. "But you're still our son." I stared at her for a long moment, then said, "You didn't think of that when you were laughing at me across the table." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I shook my head, stepping back just enough to close the door between us. "I'll let you know when the paperwork's done." Click. I didn't hear from her after that. Monday came. I met with Mr. Hadley in his office, a cozy place filled with dark wood and the smell of old books and stronger coffee. We went over the paperwork Grandpa had prepared. The land was to be divided, but not among the family. Part of it was being sold to a conservation trust, something Grandpa had been passionate about for years but never told anyone. The rest was already under contract to a developer for a small fortune. Grandpa had negotiated everything before he passed away. All I had to do was sign. And I did. When the contracts were finalized, I not only owned the house free and clear, but I'd have enough money to ensure I never had to take another mocking Thanksgiving dinner ever again. Grandpa had made sure of that. It was his final gift and his final justice. The kicker? Without the surrounding land, the house itself was worthless. The property taxes would skyrocket with the new developments around it. The utilities were overdue. Repairs needed. And none of them, not Emily, not Mom, not Uncle Mark, had the savings or the credit to fix it. They had counted on me rolling over. On me being the quiet, easygoing Daniel who would carry them without complaint. They were about to find out that Daniel didn't live here anymore. 2 weeks later, I scheduled a formal notice to be sent by courier to Mom's house. A single letter, crisp and professional. Notification of property ownership transfer, tax responsibility, and an official eviction date if arrangements weren't made. They had 30 days. 30 days to pack up and figure out their own lives. Or 30 days until the sheriff showed up at the door with orders to remove them. The same night the letters were delivered, my phone lit up with a torrent of calls and texts. Not just Mom and Emily, cousins, aunts, even some friends I hadn't heard from in years. All of them singing the same tired song. How could you? This isn't what Grandpa would have wanted. Family is everything. Blood is thicker than water. I didn't respond to a single one. Instead, I sat on my couch, turned off my phone, poured myself a drink, and toasted silently to the man who had believed in me when no one else did. I thought about what Grandpa once said, one evening when we sat on the porch and watched the sun set behind the fields. Sometimes, he said, family isn't who shares your name. It's who shares your values. Don't let them guilt you into forgetting that. I hadn't. And now? Now it was time for them to learn that actions, even the ones you think are harmless jabs, little jokes at Thanksgiving dinners, have consequences. And I wasn't done yet. Because while they scrambled to figure out where to go, how to beg or bully their way back in, I was planning something even bigger, something permanent, something they could never undo. The 30 days passed like clockwork. I thought, for a while, they might try something desperate, some last-ditch effort to guilt-trip me, maybe even drag me into court on some flimsy pretext. After all, Emily had always been the queen of dramatics. I half expected her to show up on my doorstep, crocodile tears ready, begging for mercy. Or maybe Mom would come again, pie in hand, offering sweet words wrapped around thinly veiled threats. But they didn't. At least, not right away. At first, they tried the silent treatment. The same tactic they'd used on me 100 times when I was growing up. They acted like if they just ignored me long enough, I'd come crawling back, desperate for acceptance. They posted photos online, happy, smiling family gatherings, as if to prove to the world and themselves that they were thriving. As if I were the one missing out. I didn't bite. Then came the anger. Emily, of course, led the charge. Furious texts, snide Facebook posts, whispered campaigns among the extended family. Daniel's gone power-hungry. Daniel's selfish. Daniel's destroying the family legacy. I watched it all from a distance, unbothered. Let them talk. Words were cheap. Reality, cold, hard, legally binding reality was coming for them, whether they acknowledged it or not. When the final week hit, the tone shifted again. Desperation. Mom sent a long, rambling email about tradition and roots, and how could you do this to your own mother? Uncle Mark called twice and left voicemails full of half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. Even Evan, who hadn't spoken 2 words to me in the last year, sent a text saying, "Hey man, maybe we can work something out? No need to make it ugly." I didn't respond. They made their choices. They laughed at me, mocked me, treated me like an afterthought until the moment they realized they needed me. And I wasn't about to save them from the consequences they'd worked so hard to earn. The day before the eviction deadline, I went back to the house. I wanted to see it one last time before everything changed, before it stopped being the old, worn-out family home and became just another memory. I pulled into the driveway just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in soft purples and deep golds. The place looked smaller than I remembered. sadder. The paint was peeling worse than ever. The porch steps sagged under their own weight. The yard, once vibrant under Grandpa's care, was overgrown and wild. I sat in my truck for a minute, taking it all in. Part of me ached, deep down, not for them, but for what the place had meant. For what it could have been if the people inside had cared half as much about the family as they did about themselves. When I finally stepped out, I wasn't surprised to find Emily waiting for me on the porch. She looked rough. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, her arms crossed tight over her chest like she was trying to hold herself together by force. "You're really going through with this," she said, her voice hollow. I didn't say anything. She took a step closer, her heels clicking sharply on the warped wood. "You know Mom has nowhere to go. Uncle Mark's broke. Evan's barely scraping by. You're throwing them out onto the street." I shrugged. "Not my problem. They're adults. They can figure it out." "You're disgusting," she spat. I smiled faintly. "You didn't think I was so disgusting when you thought you were getting a free house." Her face twisted, like she wanted to scream. Instead, she choked it back, fists trembling at her sides. "You're going to regret this," she said finally, voice shaking with rage. I met her gaze evenly. "No, I'm not." I left her standing there, stormed past her into the house, and headed straight to Grandpa's study. It was almost exactly how he had left it: old leather chair, dusty bookshelves, the faint smell of pipe tobacco lingering in the air. I closed the door behind me and opened the old desk drawer. Inside was a thick manila envelope, right where Grandpa said it would be in his letter. Inside the envelope were two things: the deed to the house and a notarized letter dated months before he passed. "Daniel," it read, "if you're reading this, it means they've shown their true colors. I'm sorry you have to be the one to clean up the mess, but I know you're strong enough to do it. This house doesn't belong to people who treat others like tools or punching bags. It belongs to someone who understands what family is supposed to mean. Whatever you decide to do with it, sell it, tear it down, build something new. I'm proud of you. Always have been. Love, Grandpa." I sat there for a long moment, letting the words sink in. Outside, I could hear the muffled sounds of Emily yelling into her phone, probably rallying the troops for one last pathetic stand. I didn't care. When I finally stood up, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I called Mr. Hadley from the study phone. "Proceed," I said simply. The next morning, the sheriff arrived right on schedule. I didn't go to the house. I didn't need to. Mr. Hadley handled everything: the paperwork, the locks, the official notice posted on the door. By noon, they were gone. Some left with bags hastily stuffed into cars. Others called in favors, crashed on couches, scraped together what dignity they could. Emily screamed at the sheriff, threatened lawsuits, cried in the driveway. None of it mattered. It was done. The house sat empty for 3 weeks after that. I drove by once or twice, just to see it. It looked almost peaceful, stripped of the chaos and bitterness that had infected it for so long. Then the bulldozers arrived. The house came down in a single day, a cloud of dust rising into the clear blue sky like a final exorcism of everything toxic that had clung to it for years. In its place, the developer, working from Grandpa's old designs, built a community center. A place for kids to play, for families to gather, for people to connect, the way families are supposed to. It was named after Grandpa, the James Whitmore Memorial Center. There's a plaque out front with his favorite quote: "Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your heart." I stood there the day it opened, hands in my pockets, watching kids run across the new playground, parents laughing and talking nearby. No bitterness, no fake smiles, no knives hidden behind backs. Real family. The kind Grandpa would have been proud of. I never saw much of the old family after that. Emily moved 2 towns over, still blaming everyone but herself for her downfall. Mom eventually found a small apartment, quiet and lonely, though she tried reaching out a few times. I didn't hate her, but I didn't open the door, either. Some wounds don't need salt poured in them, but they don't need reopening, either. As for me, I bought a little house on the edge of town with a big porch and a swing set in the backyard. I'm married now. Got a little girl who's learning how to ride a bike. Some nights, we sit on the porch, and I tell her stories about a man named Grandpa James, who built houses with his own 2 hands, who believed in kindness, who taught me that real family is earned, not inherited. She listens with big eyes, swinging her legs back and forth, asking 1,000 questions. And every time she laughs, a bright, unburdened laugh, I know Grandpa was right. Family isn't what you're born into. It's what you build, one choice at a time. And I built something better. Something real. Something that no amount of lies, jealousy, or cruelty could ever tear down again.